Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Brockton Bay Chronicles. This will be our second summary episode. Andy, why don't you tell everyone what's coming up this episode?
I'd be glad to. We've got a number of questions and comments that we'll be covering. Then we'll do a deeper examination of a few scenes from this section of arcs that we did since the previous summary episode. And then we'll have a special guest who's a really big fan of all of Wildbow's work. And I will pose some questions to him, and he will answer them without hopefully giving away too much of what's going to be coming down the pike.
I'm definitely looking forward to that. And with all that being said, let's dive in and see what our listeners have to contribute. First up, I will take a point of privilege and I'll post the first question. So, we've seen the POV from Armsmaster, Dragon, Pigott, Legend, and even the Wards. How has your opinion of the Protectorate evolved since the beginning?
Quite a bit, I would say. You know, it definitely came across, and there's no pun intended, I guess, but kind of a hero worship thing from Taylor about, reading about the Protectorate and how they were the guardians and trying to keep things on track, and that, there were horrible things like the Endbringers out there, and it made him seem, probably too perfect, I guess. But comics up until, I don't know, the 80s maybe, or the 90s were very much the same way. But once people realized that having superpowers in one area didn't necessarily make you a super person,
Mm-hmm.
then the capes became more three-dimensional. And I think we saw that over time through the different points of view, where, especially, Pigott, you kind of expect, that's kind of like the drill sergeant persona, but like especially the Legend stuff from the latest one. And then some of the Wards, you really start to realize these are all just people too. And maybe things are even more challenging for them because they have this added responsibility. I mean, Wildbow talks about Amy, or Panacea, and how she struggled with that a lot.
Right.
And how it became, a real burden for her. So, and, Armsmaster, we've talked about how he felt like he was kind of second fiddle and really deserved to be the leader, but wasn't being selected. And that caused him to kind of color outside the lines and put Brockton Bay in danger, basically. So it's matured. My point of view has matured quite a bit regarding the Protectorate over this course. And I think that's Wildbow did a good job on that. If you kind of make people or characters too realistic or too covered in warts and scars at the beginning, then it can be kind of a turnoff, at least for me, where it's kind of like, well, this is like reading a soap opera. This is just all, I deal with these kind of annoying things all the time in real life. I don't want to read about it. This is an escape. But then as you go forward, you're kind of like, oh, wait, that makes sense that this person would have this struggle or this concern. So I think he's done a great job of that.
Excellent. Next, we have a reply from Megafire7. And Megafire points out, he says that we were talking about Good Omens, which is also a very good book. And when I saw that comment, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the one. I'm going to have to put that on my watch list.
I highly recommend it. Yeah. And, Neil Gaiman is an amazing writer, and I've really done him a disservice, I guess you'd say, by not reading more of his stuff. And I think Terry Pratchett is the other author that he worked with on that one. And I haven't read much of Pratchett's stuff either. But in my defense, there's like a gajillion good science fiction books out there. And, I'm only one tiny man in the library. So I'm doing the best I can. But yeah, I can imagine it's a great book. I did read American Gods after watching that, and that was a great book too. So Neil Gaiman has a very interesting way of approaching things, and I really enjoy his stuff.
Next is a comment from Wonderful Lizard of Oz. The figurative imagery of little Rachel in the bunker is very interesting.
I think he's referring to what I think of as like the bunker mentality, where you kind of get everything, you have to put everything aside. It's all about survival. And I think the idea for it came from Band of Brothers. It wasn't really well, I guess it was a series, like a mini series, I guess, kind of bigger.
You haven't seen the mini series?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
And I read the book too, but
okay.
Yeah, was it the Battle of the Bulge, where they're in the winter, trapped in the forest and totally surrounded, and their supplies are running out, and trees are exploding when they get hit by a shell, and people are dying from giant 4 foot long splinters going through them and stuff. That's what I think of as the bunker mentality. You're like, I'm just going to dig down into the frozen mud down here, and it's going to stink, and I stink, and everything is horrible, but I just got to try to get through the night and through the next day, and I can't worry about what else is going on. So that's something that I think we all go through that at certain aspects in our life, but when Wildbow touches on Rachel's life, you can really imagine her getting in that mode.
Yeah, I think you had also mentioned the thought of having it surrounded by thorny bush. Was it barbed wire or just kind of thorny projections? Just another layer of things to keep people away from her, to keep people from hurting her even more.
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of times that happens unconsciously in the bunker mentality. I think you end up maybe frowning a lot, or just kind of having a vibe where people are like, yeah, no, I'm not even going to say hi. You don't look like you want to be approached. So, but yeah, Rachel takes it to a whole nother level. She's like a pro at it.
Is well, let's dig on this a little bit. Is Skitter, well, I can't say that. Do you think Skitter will successfully break her out of that bunker, or will she be successful getting her to maybe at least remove the thorny projections from around it?
That's really hard to say. It could go either way. The only way I've seen that be successful is that you basically have to figuratively be in the bunker with the person. So they have to be able to totally believe that you grasp what they've gone through and grasp what they might be going through. And that takes a whole, I mean, Skitter's definitely made forays in that direction. And I think there's been some varied success with it. But as we've seen, you can maybe try to tell somebody, hey, it's okay to come out of the bunker, and they might start to believe you. But then if anything goes wrong as they're starting to peek over the edge, then they go in even deeper.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know what? No, you were wrong. You lied to me. I can't even trust you either. And so I would think it would take something horrible happening. Maybe if, and I really hope this doesn't happen, but if Skitter ended up in a position like Gru ended up, where she's flayed alive, or, in this horrible thing, or, in some kind of mental prison where she's being worked over by somebody like Regent or Cherish, and Rachel can really see afterwards that Skitter gets it, then maybe. But otherwise, I don't think anybody's going to get through to Rachel.
Okay. All right. Again, we hear from Megafire7. The way you describe Brian's copying Amy's power to fix Atlas' digestive system made something click for me in regards to his second trigger event and his new power after. We saw back in Arc 5 that Brian struggled with leading the team, and Rachel especially, and found he had to resort to violence to keep her in line, even though he hated doing it, because he didn't know what else to do and he didn't understand her. And now he gets the ability to copy power of those in his darkness, but he doesn't get the understanding of their powers. He still has to brute force his way through things like that because he's not actually gotten to the point where he understands how people work. Interesting comparison, associating his dynamic as a leader and his inefficient management of people with his use of this power, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that is an interesting take. So we've speculated that Skitter has, this thinker side to her powers as well. Mm-hmm. And, whether it's about just kind of hive mentality or whether it's actual secondary power or whatever, she definitely seems to be really good at planning and understanding how other people might behave. And so, yeah, Gru could definitely be picking up on some of that. And there are other people too. Tattletale has insights. And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting take. And it might, because they kind of fly under the radar a little bit, those powers, unless it's the primary thing, then that would make it even harder for Gru to really do anything other than brute force it. It's Tattletale has this whole thing where she can follow a thread and then go down a rabbit hole, but she's learned how to do that because that's her shtick. But Gru might have similar things and not even be able to recognize it because it's kind of in the mix with all the other stuff going on in his head that he's trying to figure out. So, yeah, it's a cool take from Megafire 7.
Definitely. Now we hear from Freak Circus, and this particular one's kind of lengthy. I think I'm going to touch on a couple of sections of it. Miss Militia is technically not a tinker. The green energy that follows her around turns into man-made weapons, probably because it's using her knowledge as a source, and that's what she's familiar with. At least that's what I think. As far as a tinker using another tinker's tech, a non-tinker will be confused at the inner workings of the item, and perhaps only the tinker that built the thing can truly comprehend its work. Yes, thank you, Freak Circus. I don't know why in the world I keep wanting to refer to Miss Militia as a tinker when she's not one. So thank you for reminding me of that fact. And then also clarifying the issue about one tinker being able to see or to kind of get another tinker's work, but only the originator of the idea can truly understand its workings. You want to take some of this, Andy?
That makes a lot of sense. The reason that my friend calls people who kind of put things together riggers, the reason people kind of get in rigger mode is that they understand basic principles which are kind of universal. Like a pulley allowing someone to lift twice as much as they would normally lift, or those kind of things, basic things like levers and that kind of thing. But that's because they're always that way. But tinkers, as I understand it so far, are coming up with new things and almost maybe bending or at least skirting kind of universal principles and putting things together in innovative ways. And so it would totally make sense that another tinker looking at it wouldn't have had the same mental path to get to where this first tinker did. So without kind of the breadcrumbs in your head, just operating from those universal principles, you'd be like, well, I think I see what you did there, but you wouldn't be able to follow the trail necessarily. So that makes a lot of sense.
Now we hear from Johannes E, and I'm going to abbreviate your use your last initial because I'm a coward and don't want to risk butchering your name. So Johannes has this to add. Prions are really nasty. It's the same type of thing that causes mad cow disease, and it's not even a living organism, just a malformed, self-replicating protein. They are notoriously difficult to get rid of because of this. Imagine trying to develop some kind of drug that targets just this one protein that isn't even that different from the proteins that are supposed to be there. Makes perfect sense for Bonesaw to use them for that fact alone. Yeah, I can see that absolutely. And I think that was touched on in the text. Wildbow, pardon me, Bonesaw, when she was playing Tattletale, that she kind of identified what she thought Bonesaw might have done to create that miasma. So in that sense, her being a biological tinker, you can see why she would do something like this and why it would make an effective and an extremely frightening weapon.
I wasn't even aware of a lot of this, but yeah, it's kind of like when you're trying to use some kind of solvent to remove something. If there's other stuff there that's similar enough in molecular structure to what you're trying to remove, then it's probably going to get removed too.
Yeah.
So trying to target it with a drug, a prion with a drug, would be very hard because it's like, well, I don't want to get rid of all my proteins. They're kind of important.
Yeah. And this one, this false protein looks an awful lot like these others. So how are we going to tailor make something to deal with this specific one? Yeah. That would be really tough to do.
No doubt.
Next, we hear from Vale. Getting to enjoy Worm vicariously through others is one of my favorite things. Thanks for continuing to do this. Question for Andy. How has Taylor grown, and what are your thoughts on her now versus where she was in, let's say, arc 3 or so?
She's grown a lot. You know, she definitely was a fledgling at the beginning of the story and learning about her powers, very naive about how things worked with Parahumans and the Protectorate. You know, definitely thinking things were very much more cut and dried than they've turned out to be. And there were any number of ways that things could have gone. And as we've gone through this, they have gone different ways at different times where, you know, she's been, okay, I'm leaving the Undersiders. And then, okay, I'm leaving my dad. And then, all right, I'm going to kill Shadowstalker. And then, okay, maybe not kill her, but we'll do this other thing instead. And so it's been a very interesting progression for Taylor. And I think we're going to see as we proceed that this thinker power that she has contributed to that. And then that begs the question, and I'm sure you've seen this in athletes that you've coached, if a person isn't put in a position to develop skills, so if you have somebody who's a running back and they never get to throw the ball, then you're never going to find out if they can throw the ball. But you run a halfback option and they make a perfect pass, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, maybe we should be training that. So if Taylor hadn't moved into this situation and had to navigate this and constantly be trying to deal with the shifting players and the shifting alliances, then who knows if how much her thinker side would have grown. And so she kind of got thrown into the deep end with that. And I think that's accelerated her growth. And so I think we're going to continue to see that. Hopefully not to the extent of Jack, where she gets off on like, well, I'll try to pit these people against each other and see what happens and see if I can figure it out. But being able to more quickly evaluate situations and cut right to the best option, and feel confident about it. So that's my predicted growth pattern for Taylor.
Let me tie this back to the observation about your comment regarding Rachel being in the bunker. Do you care to comment on how Taylor has grown managing interpersonal relationships from the beginning to where she is now as a character?
Sure. Well, first off, that's part of the natural growth process for anybody.
Sure.
Right. You start off high school and you think, oh, wow, I'm in high school now. But really, you're just a couple months out of 8th grade. And now you're back at the bottom of the ladder and you feel totally inept most of the time and way out of your depth. But as you navigate through high school, you start realizing, well, these people that I thought were all that are really not all that. They're screwing up just as bad as I am. It's just they're better at covering it up, or they're better at bluffing their way through it. Like, oh yeah, I meant to do that. That was supposed to be a somersault in the middle of the hall, but when they really tripped over something. And so I think some of it is just natural as Taylor is getting older through the story. But yeah, dealing with bullying is a super hard thing, and especially if you don't feel like you've got the kind of support you need from the people that should be protecting you. And Taylor was definitely going through that at the beginning. And even though a lot of the situations were pretty horrible, they taught her that you don't have to be a victim. There's not only two sides to that coin, like you're the victim or you're the person who's inflicting being mean. You don't have to be a doormat or a sledgehammer. You can be a scalpel, or you can be a Swiss Army knife. Sometimes you use this tool, sometimes you use that tool. Sometimes you run, sometimes you face a confrontation, sometimes you talk through it, whatever. And I think she's definitely grown a lot with that. To a certain extent, it is, kind of down to that nature and nurture question. It's, if you have a certain level of support from home, then you're going to be more likely to think you can achieve, you can succeed. If you don't have that, then it's going to be a struggle, and you're going to need to have other people in your life to kind of do that. The Parahumans have this other side to them, though, where it's like they almost have kind of a built-in support from their powers. And so if they can learn to work with that in a symbiotic relationship, then it can, hugely bolster confidence. And once you're feeling more confident, then you're able to kind of explore who you are and what works for you and that kind of thing. So I think that kind of going thrown in the deep end has accelerated the growth for Taylor, but I think it's part of just everybody's life. But I think her powers have definitely helped.
And our final question and / comment is once again from Freak Circus, who comes with another lengthy but intriguing section here. Once again, I'm going to pull out a couple of sections that I found intriguing, and then I'll throw the question to you at the end, Andy, and you can address any sections of the commentary and then answer the question. So here goes. Skitter could definitely use some extra padding on her souls, but with the fallout of Leviathan and the S9 showing up almost immediately after, I don't really blame her for overlooking that part of her costume. Maybe the costume does protect her from debris, but the shrapnel on the boat graveyard is just that bad. Thank you, Freak Circus. I had completely forgot or overlooked the timeline. There was the Leviathan fight, and then the 9, which is their deal. They tend to come almost immediately after an Endbringer event. So she was in the process of standing up her territory. So it makes sense that she wouldn't necessarily be in a position to, it was a couple of weeks maybe, or a few days after Leviathan, the S9 began to make their presence known. So the city was recovering. She was busy. So it was just, again, one of those little nitnoid kind of things that me being a little tightly wound just kind of stuck on me, stuck in my brain. But thanks for helping me out there. One other section that I wanted to pop in on from his commentary had to do with his observation about legend, and in particular, this comment that Freak Circus made about his interaction with Kid and his interaction and encouragement of Kid Win, which I think I really appreciated. It spoke to me as a coach, for having coached all these many years. One of the most satisfying things for me working with my athletes, whether it was track or football, was when whether they be male or female, when that athlete got it, when I was able to help them see something in themselves, and then they recognized it and was able to excel. It's an extremely rewarding feeling, and helped me want to be a better coach. And so seeing someone as big as legend, in this universe, the guy, the man in the protectorate, take a moment to make an observation about something Kid Win did great in an interaction, and comparing him, or recognizing a comparison between him and Hero, the first real prominent tinker. I think that speaks highly of Legend's character. And then on to the question real quick, and then you can chime in and give your thoughts on that. Freak Circus question is: with 3 of the 9 dead, Cherish at the bottom of Brockton Bay, and Shatterbird in Coil's custody, Jack is down to only himself, Bonesaw, and Siberian. Do you think he's going to try to recruit new members on the fly, even if they're not worthy, quote unquote, or is he going to try to make do with just the 3 of them for a while? So you were going to address the legend thing?
Yeah, if I could. Encouragement is a very rare commodity in our world, and studies have shown how much it can change somebody's outlook, and how impactful it can be. And so I totally agree with your assessment on legend, and also the way Freak Circus has framed it. And to that point, I really appreciate all the encouraging comments from the folks that have posted comments. Keith and I just started doing this for fun, and neither of us have any training in anything remotely like this.
No.
And so, but it's amazing how much it lifts my spirits to read things like we touched on earlier, where Vale mentioned that he really thanked us for continuing to do this, and that he enjoys that. So thank you for the encouragement. Regarding the 9, my guess would be that Jack probably has a case file of other candidates. They do kind of have this process where their recruitment standard way of doing things is to wait for the Endbringers to hit, and then they swoop in while the area's reeling and distracted, and try to recruit then. But my guess is he probably has his finger on the pulse of a lot of different folks that are possible candidates, and he really likes playing people off against each other and trying to keep people on the hook. 1 minute saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to go do this," and kind of feeding them what they want, but then on the other side digging them by knowing what triggers them to feel bad about themselves. And so I'm guessing that just having 2 people to do that with is not going to be near enough for him. So I'm thinking he's going to try to build out really fast, but I don't know if it's going to be on the fly. I mean, it will be on the fly, but I think there'll be some plan there, just a different plan than their usual.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And we really appreciate. I want to piggyback on what Andy said. Folks, this was just a hobby for us. It was a crazy idea I had last year, and the amount of commentary and questions and contributions we get from folks is really, really wonderful. It's a nice community, and we're glad that everyone's here, and we hope you'll continue to stay with us and chime in every now and again as we keep going forward. And with that, we are done with our questions and comments. So now it's time for Andy's deeper dive. Andy's identified story segments he wants to revisit and give a closer look. So, you want to talk a little more about everybody's favorite little sister, huh?
Yeah, I was looking at one of the streaming services the other day, and there's all sorts of different cape type shows on them, and it got me thinking about invisibility. And I realized that I couldn't think of anybody really in Worm that really, fit kind of that classic invisible girl from Fantastic Four kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, Imp is kind of invisible, and that was kind of the take that Wildbow had. And so I thought that would be good to explore, because I think she's a real intriguing character, and the dynamic with Gru makes it hard for her to kind of really realize her potential, and causes her to put herself in harm's way. But yeah, I thought it'd be enjoyable to talk about Imp and how she showed up in this section of Worm.
All right. First, it looks like you're wanting to discuss her initial appearance during Arc 9. What do you have to say about that?
Well, that was a really neat segment where they were trapping Shadowstalk, and it's a real brief glimpse. It's just Shadowstalker kind of cataloging the people that are around and noticing that there's this other person there. So, but I was going back and trying to prepare for this segment, I thought it's interesting that through the rest of that chapter, Shadowstalker, is recognizing that different folks are there, and interacting with his stuff, but then you never hear about Imp again. And so I'm guessing this has to be intentional, but Wildbow writes Imp in such a way that she is kind of invisible. Like, she's there. She didn't just show up at that part and then leave, but she's never mentioned again. So it's like everybody's kind of forgetting about her.
I hadn't considered that. Yeah, okay. I see where you're going.
So, I mean, yeah, because she's kind of new to her power. But as we see in the next part, we'll touch on about her interlude, that's been kind of her life, is like the invisible person in the family with all the stuff her mom deals with. And so when they're dealing with Shadowstalker and things are stressful and everything, she's probably, even if she's not focusing her power, it's probably bleeding off a little bit, I'm guessing. And so it's like she vanishes from the scene,
Mm-hmm.
and people stop thinking about her. And like I said, I think Wildbow wrote it that way intentionally, because he mentions everybody else, and he mentions Impa there at the beginning, and then not for the rest of the time. And so I thought that was pretty cool, the way that he did that.
Excellent. I am going to have to go back and reread that section, I think. Were you carrying that between Arc 9 and 10, or did you want to talk about Arc 10 specifically next?
No, yeah, that kind of all went together on Arc 9 and 10. Yeah. So in Arc 13, though,
Okay.
She's really there a lot. And we have this interlude that's just her point of view. And I thought that was really well done, and got me thinking about how her power could expand and how she could use it more effectively. So, she's there in Coil's hideout when they got kind of the rules of the game from the Slaughterhouse 9.
Right.
And they're all interacting, and she's kind of chiming in and being a little obnoxious, as you said, kind of just everybody's favorite little sister. And then, she makes a really good point, I think, and Coyle kind of agrees that it would be great if there was some way to get some intel on the Slaughterhouse Nine rather than just kind of wait for them to appear, try to bug their headquarters, so to speak. And so, but of course she makes that play and everybody's like, this is the Slaughterhouse Nine, so no, you're just barely starting out on your parahuman journey here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even want you to take down the thug across the street, let alone the Slaughterhouse Nine. So, and she makes some good points that she's very hard to detect, but they bring up that, well, Dragon detected you, so it's not like you're all the way off of all of the spectrums. There are ways to find you. But Imp being Imp, she says, oh, forget it, and then leaves. And I love the way Wildbow wrote that scene, in that Gru stands up and says, hey, and then everybody's like, why did he do that?
And even Gru was kind of befuddled and like,
right.
Sorry, I don't know why I did that. I'm embarrassed. Don't look at me.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then Tattletale, though, kind of has enough on the ball, or her power gives her enough to remember that, hey, maybe we should have some kind of surveillance gear installed in our suits, so that we have these kind of cop cam kind of things that will allow us to play it back and say, oh wait, no, she did take my donut. I knew I had a donut there. Darn it.
Right. The sibling interaction between those two in that moment in Coyle's base, that was particularly interesting. Brian was not wrong to be concerned for her safety, and I think you alluded to that. Imp later on does speculate if her own hyperactivity may be a result of the abuse, the substance abuse from her mom, which may be making her a little short with her brother when he does bring up good points. But you're right, that she had a good point. Maybe she didn't do the best job making the point, and Brian put his foot down as the elder sibling, concerned for her safety.
Well, right, yeah, and Brian had kind of almost moved into a guardian role, right? I mean, that's the path he was on, trying to work with the social workers and stuff. And so, I can't imagine. Well, I can a little bit imagine. I made some really stupid moves with my younger siblings when I was a senior in high school. My parents left me briefly in charge, and so I can't imagine, with all the stuff going on in their world, even with superpowers, how much stress Brian must be under. And, the problem with, I think, people who kind of feel quote unquote invisible as kids is that they will sometimes act out just to get attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's, if any attention is good, even if it's bad attention.
Yeah.
And so, you don't want to pay attention that I got good grades. All right, how about if I set the drapes on fire? Did that get your attention? Well, I got spanked, but hey, at least you're looking at me now. And so it's got to be a super hard position for Brian to be in. But Imp has had a super hard life, and she's had to fend for herself a lot. And the problem with that is that can lead to kind of a overconfidence.
Mm-hmm.
You think you can get through anything. I think about the old Christmas movie Home Alone, where he starts thinking that, oh yeah, I can just go to the store with some coupons, and and I made this happen, and then he keeps running into things where it's like, oh, I thought this worked this way, but nope, that was not a good idea. And so I think Imp's going through that same kind of thing. And then her interlude, I think, shows that even more, where it's like when you're playing a video game for the first time, and you're like, all right, well, I got the good weapon, I got the good armor, I'm in good health. I'm just going to go in here blazing.
Sure.
And that works for a couple of rooms. And then you hit the room full of baddies and you're toast. You're like, oh, okay. So then you get in the thing of, I'll go in a little ways and then back out, or I'll peek around the corner. You come up with strategies. And so she does her reconnaissance. She figures out where to go. She gets past the first layer of defense. Okay, well, that wasn't so hard. She gets even further. Then next thing you know, she's trying to stab somebody. And you're like, what? But she just keeps thinking, well, this is easy. I got this. This is no problem. And then, she kind of gets away. But then, Cherish is able to detect her through emotional. So
right.
So that's one of those things that's not, that part of her isn't invisible, if you will. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I thought it was a really neat take, that she's not full on invisible, but I could definitely see it being, if she gets a little more cautious and a little more strategic, this could be really, really powerful. And I think about like Coil's power, where he goes down two different paths and then he says, all right, I'm going to do this one.
Right.
And then, what if he wrote down some notes and Imp was watching him write them down the whole time, and then he left the room and she changed some of the words and put the paper back on the table, and then he forgot, and he'd be like, oh, okay, no, that's right, I was going to give Imp $1 billion and the keys to my mansion.
Uh-huh.
And then he's like, who's Imp again? And then next thing you know, she's all set up and they're like, I don't even know how that happened or what's happening. So it's really neat. I think it's got a ton of potential, and I'm looking forward to what happens with Imp down the road.
Outstanding. Yeah, she's a very cool character, and she grew on me as the story progressed. I think I can say that safely. So
okay, cool. Yeah, I was worried that she was going to just keep sticking her hand in the bear trap thinking she was invincible, and then it eventually was going to get killed. So
well, I didn't say that. I didn't say that wouldn't happen. I did not say that wouldn't happen. I just said she grew on me as the story went along.
Right. That's true. You could be speaking past tense, that up to this point she grew on me and then she died. Arc 16, the death of Imp. But hopefully not.
We shall see. All right. Next up is a segment we're calling Capes versus Heroes. Andy, why don't you tell everyone what this is about?
Well, I didn't read a lot of comics growing up, but one of my favorite things, and also in comic type TV shows like Legion of Superheroes or whatever, one of the coolest things was when two heroes would have to kind of face off against each other. And usually it was some kind of like turf war or something, where it was like, oh no, I captured this guy and he's got to go to this facility. And then, oh no, he knows information. We got to take him. And so then the two heroes kind of duke it out. And, it's something we always talked about as kids, who would win if it was Superman versus Wonder Woman or whatever. And so it was just always cool to think about that. And so I had that thought kind of in the back of my head. And then I realized that there was some similarities between Worm and the TV show Heroes, where at least at the beginning, it just seems like random people are getting superpowers and they don't really know why. The show opening makes you think that has something to do with an eclipse, but that doesn't really make sense. So you're kind of left scratching your head, but it's the same process where people are trying to figure out, well, what can I do? What's going on? One of the early characters, Nikki, kind of has this streaming video of her being, doing things to excite young men who are full of testosterone. And then she comes out of like a blackout and there's just blood everywhere and there's people that are dead. And she's like, well, what happened?
Right.
And so there's all these kind of cool things where people are exploring and trying to figure out what's happening. So I thought it'd be neat to say, well, what if so and so from Worm had to take on so and so from Heroes, kind of a mashup thing.
Well, I'm really intrigued to see what your thoughts are on that. And to that end, let's begin. First off, you want to discuss Clock Blocker versus Hero.
So yeah, Hiro, Hiro, from the TV show Heroes, is a kid from Japan, or a young man, and he's convinced that he should be able to control time in some way. And so over the course of the show, he ends up being super powerful. But at the very beginning, he just is trying to get the clock at his job that is dead boring, just get the clock to move a little slower or a little faster, just trying to get something to happen, keep himself occupied. And he starts getting to where he can affect time. He can stop time. Now, the difference between his power and Clock Blocker is Clock Blocker touches somebody and their time stops.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody else keeps going. Whereas for Hero, he's able to stop time, period. And he's the only one that keeps moving. And so in one of the early episodes, he sees that a girl is about to get hit by a bus, a young schoolgirl. And so he does this thing where his whole body shakes and his a little bit pudgy face shakes, with effort. And he stops everything. And he picks the girl up and moves her out of the way of the bus, and then checks to make sure everything else is okay, and then he starts it back up again, and she's fine and never knows. She's kind of like, I was over there and now I'm here, oh well, and she just goes on about her day. But he's super stoked. So I think, especially depending on where in Hero's maturing process he is, I think he would definitely beat Clock Blocker because he could just stop everything before Clock Blocker could touch it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was early on and Clock Blocker got the drop on him, then he would freeze Hero before Hero could do anything. So I think it would be a neat thing, but I think Hero would win this one.
Excellent. Next up, we have Cherish versus Eden McCain.
So Eden McCain, you don't even know for quite a while in the Heroes TV show that she is she has superpowers. She just seems like a neighbor. So one of the main characters, Mohinder, his dad is studying the superhero phenomenon, and his dad dies. And so Mohinder goes, and his dad had left India because his theories were getting everybody upset, and he had moved to the US. So Mohinder has to follow him and is trying to figure out what his dad was up to and why he died, if it was his natural causes. And it turns out he has this attractive young neighbor, Eden McCain. And she just seems like a real helpful person, and so I wouldn't say I'm paranoid, but I definitely, when you watch adventure shows like this, you expect there to be ulterior motives. But I don't know if it was a scripting or what, but she definitely slipped under my radar. And it's only much later that you find out that she's manipulating people, including Mohinder, to try to figure out what the dad knew.
Right.
And so she's very subtle, very good at planting ideas in people. They show her at one point getting out of a traffic ticket because, she just tells the cop what he wants to hear, and he's like, yeah, okay, fine, and she gets to go on her way. So I think her versus Cherish would be a really good battle, because Cherish definitely has that same manipulative thing, but even, I think, a better sense of the emotional state of other people. So I think she'd be even better at it. I don't know if her power of suggestion is as strong as Eden McCain. So it would be kind of a battle of Cherish finding the right button to push before Eden used the hammer on her, so to speak. So that one could be a coin flip. I could see either one winning that one, but that would be a good battle to watch.
Might such a confrontation come down to range of the person's power? Because I remember It's been as I told you earlier, it's been forever since I watched Heroes, and I remember Eden McCain's power, but I couldn't remember if it was line of sight or anything like that. What the restrictions were. Whereas Cherish, she could sense essentially across a city, and then within blocks of people, manipulate them emotionally. Was that kind of? And correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that, folks. But I think that's how that would work.
Yeah, I think you have a great point there. I think Cherish definitely has a range advantage on her. I don't remember if Eden McCain could kind of mask things though or not. So if she could kind of, you know, put out a static signal or something to kind of make her harder to detect, then
Mm-hmm.
that might counteract it. But yeah, if it's just down to range, Cherish definitely has range on Eden for sure.
Next, we have Bonesaw versus Maya Herrera.
So yeah, this one was interesting. I think Bonesaw's use of the miasma and that kind of thing got me thinking it would be a good pairing with Maya. But Maya's got a kind of a weird power. She was from a later season,
Mm-hmm.
and when she got really upset, she would somehow exude like this poison that would just get into anybody who was looking at her, and their eyes would turn black and they'd cry black tears and then they would die. And and so it kind of reminded me of some of the stuff that Bonesaw talked about. So it would be a matter of whether Bonesaw could figure out how to counteract, or if she already had something that would counteract Maya's poison. Now, Maya's twin brother was the antidote, if you will. He could reverse the effects of her poison. He could get Maya to stop emitting it. But yeah, this would be, and it might be good. Might have been better to match her up against somebody like Panacea, where it's somebody trying to heal versus somebody trying to kill, rather than kind of two. And Maya wasn't evil. She hated that she had this power. She tried to control it but couldn't. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think Maya would win this one. I don't know if Bonesaw could cook up something fast enough if she couldn't, kind of like what happened with Panacea. She'd have to, like, whoa, this is messed up. I don't know, and try to come up with things really fast to kind of counteract it. But Maya's effects killed people within, I want to say, 30 seconds.
Oh
So
wow.
that's pretty hard to counteract. And I think people were, well, it was obviously super scary for it to be happening, but I think they were also kind of losing their grip on their facilities
Mm-hmm.
as they were fading. They weren't in full mental positive state. So yeah, I think Maya would win this one, unless Bonesaw saw her coming.
The only other thing that might help Bonesaw is we know that she has built-in biological improvements to the like shielding around some of the more important organs for members of the nine. I believe she put some subdermal mesh to protect them against like bullets. That's how when if you recall, that's when the Skitter shot Jack and it didn't kill him.
Right.
Um, so the question might be if, as part of her standard kit that she installs on members of the nine, she has something that would protect against poison, and whether or not, well, actually, she did have something about something like that because she told Skitter that's why stinging her with those insects wouldn't bother her.
Right.
So then maybe the question is, would Maya Herrera's poison be something that Bonesaw wouldn't have a counter agent for already built in?
That's a great point. Yeah, she has all that augmentation. She
Thank
probably
you.
has
That's the word I was looking for.
um, all sorts of additional processing, like in her liver and her other organs, to be able to handle that. So yeah, it'd be whether Maya's poison was something that fell within known poisonous agents, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If it acted on a different way, like Bonesaw's prion thing did, then it might get past her. But if it had any other similarities, yeah, then her filters might be good enough to keep her standing.
Right. Very cool. Next on our list, we have Dinah versus Isaac Mendez.
So this one is more of a comparison, I guess, of powers rather than versus, because neither of them are offensive in any way, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I first off, I think the Heroes franchise did a super marketing strategy by having one of their characters be graphic novel artist that
Right.
drew stuff that related to, it was like built in cross marketing.
Sure.
It's like you watch the show, you got to buy the graphic novel because it's got stuff that isn't in the show, and there's stuff that's in the show that isn't in the novel, so you need to watch. So brilliant on their part. I got to give them kudos for that. I someday I need to go back and read the graphic novels. I think that'd be cool. But so Dinah, I think, trumps Isaac quite a bit in this, although Dinah has probabilities, whereas Isaac draws stuff that really is going to happen. The pictures he draws are visions of the future that are going to happen.
So true prophecy versus probability.
Exactly. Now the difference is that Dinah has this probability, and she also has a time frame, whereas Isaac paints a picture and it's going to happen, but you have no idea when. And so it could be today, it could be a year from now. So it's an interesting balance between that, and if Dinah had, this kind of photographic, like this is going to happen, then I think she'd be pretty overpowered in the story. So the way Wildbow wrote her, I think, is really good, that she has these probabilities. She has a rough time range, but it's not like this is happening tomorrow for sure. And then the way they did it and with Isaac Mendez was just that he is for sure that it's going to happen, but so it's 100% probability, but no idea when. Because otherwise, it would have been like, oh, well, this is going to happen a week from Tuesday. I guess I won't be there that day.
Right. Yeah. And our final comparison is Imp versus the Haitian.
Yeah. So the Haitian is a really interesting one in Heroes, and they write him a little bit similarly to the way I think Wildbow is writing Imp, in that he shows up, but you don't know what happens after that. It's just like there'll be a scene and he's there, and then it cuts to some other scene that's totally unrelated. It's got the same people in it, but you're like, okay. And then finally, after a while, you realize that his thing is being able to steal people's memories. He's able to, erase that this happened. And it turns out that his partner that works for this kind of or superhero control agency, or trying to track down superheroes, his partner has been using the Haitian to erase memories from the guy's wife to keep his job a secret.
Yeah.
And it starts getting pretty creepy, because it's just like, it's like thinking about Panacea forcing Victoria to love her.
Yeah.
It's just like, man, that's just messed up, And so it's kind of the flip side of the coin, though, with Imp. Imp doesn't go in and take memories out. It's like her power erases herself from the scene. And so this would be an interesting one. Again, it's kind of the clock blocker hero thing, where you have this power that is kind of an area of effect, versus somebody needing to touch somebody and say, I'm taking these memories away from you.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So the Haitian wouldn't know Imp was there, but if she did something and he somehow noticed, then he'd be able to take away her memory of having the power, or of him being there, and then she, and then put her anywhere, give her a shot, knock her out, put her somewhere else, and she doesn't even know who she is at all.
Oh, wow.
So I think there was one episode where Bennett, the Haitian's partner, said, take it all. and just left this guy, a drooling wreck. He had like basically no mind. So the Haitians' power is definitely stronger, but it is area. It has to be contact.
Mm-hmm.
So again, a little bit like the Cherish Eden thing, you've got the range factor. So Imp could definitely sneak up on the Haitian. So he would almost need a partner or that little surveillance camera or something to keep him on his toes about it.
Excellent. Well, this was extremely intriguing, but when you suggested it, I was really looking forward to seeing where your mind was going to go, and you did not disappoint. So thanks for coming up with this segment.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, this was fun.
And that brings us to the end of Capes versus Heroes. Next up is our segment with our guest. This was recorded at a different time due to scheduling. Now we want to welcome our first ever guest. As I've mentioned before, my stepson was the person who's responsible for getting me to read Worm. When I finally started, he was my go-to resource for questions about the story. I've been looking for a chance to get him on the podcast since we began. And after long last, we've got him. He's a big fan of Wildbow's work and well-versed in the universe he created. I affectionately call him number one son. His friends call him Taj. The family just calls him Tony. Hello, Tony, and welcome to the Brockton Bay Chronicles. How's it going?
Hey, how you doing?
We're doing good. Why don't you give us a quick rundown of how you came to read Worm, and maybe tell us about some of the other stories from Wildbow that you've read?
All right, yeah. So I was introduced to Worm by a friend as well. And I think that's kind of how a lot of this happens, is that someone stumbles across Worm on, top web fiction, and then kind of has to rave about it to their friends and beg them to read it until eventually something inspires them to start. That was the case for me. My friend was like kind of deep into it. It's like, T, you got to read this. It's this really cool gritty superhero story about this girl who controls bugs, and initially I was like, oh, I was really big in reading comics and watching shows. This is also coming kind of a little bit off of the heroes coming back, and where you're starting to see a lot more of those gritty superhero stories kind of getting popular. And first I was like, there's no, it's not a comic or anything. And he's like, no, but it's really good. You should read it. And he kind of convinced me as he like explained how the what kind of powers these people have and what they're doing, and how Wildbow is so unique with how he approached the power scaling and the mechanics and everything. And that got me into it. And yeah, I basically, once I got kind of a little deep in the story, I was just absolutely hooked, and I couldn't put it down until I got to the end. And from there, I was just basically became a Wildbow fan for life. And I read all of his next few works, Pact, this supernatural drama story, and then read Twig, which is I think my favorite work from him so far. Which is like a biopunk set in the 1920s, 1930s, where basically just imagine a world where you have a whole bunch of people like Bonesaw running around and able to create stitched abominations and create crazy plagues, and and that's just the way warfare works in this world, and it's really cool. And then I haven't read his latest work yet. It's probably his longest one, Pale.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm probably going to start that once I finish a different web serial, not by Wildbow, called A Practical Guide to Evil, which is also really good.
All right. Well, we are certainly glad to have you here, and we appreciate you spending a few minutes of your time. So, folks, this next segment that we have him on board for, we are calling 10 Questions for Taj. Andy, why don't you tell everyone what it's all about?
So, first off, I'm so glad that you got your dad involved in this, Tony. It's been a pleasure to dive into this with him. And the one problem I have is just restraining myself from reading ahead. So
yeah, and it's gonna get worse.
oh, don't say that, man.
It burns.
So talking to Keith about it, and oftentimes he would say, well, let me check with Tony and see, what he has to say about this. And so I thought, why not go to the source and pose some questions to you? I don't know that we're going to get to 10 of them because I don't know if Keith's told you, but I've been reading science fiction and comics since I was a little kid. So, one thing that we read in Worm sparks a bunch of ideas from other stuff I've read, and then I go flying off into the ether somewhere. So who knows how these questions are going to go? But that 6 questions for Taj didn't really rhyme very well. So, so yeah, I'll pose a question. If you can, don't spoil anything. We're just finishing arc 14, and feel free to plead the fifth or no comment or whatever if it doesn't make sense. Or if it, there's just no way to answer it without giving something away.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. So my first question is about Scion. Can you give any insight into the mystery of Scion? Is there no way of contacting him? Is Dragon able to track him? And I'd heard that word somewhere before. I'd read it somewhere, and it's kind of an archaic word, but it means, or it can mean, a wealthy aristocratic descendant or even an heir. So I don't know, is that a clue that Wildbow was throwing my way?
Maybe. So yeah, when you brought up the definition of Scion, there were a couple of definitions. I don't know if that definition fully fits for Scion. But Wildbow does like to play with names and words a lot, as you can tell by the name of a lot of the capes. I don't want to give too much away, but I will give you a fun little teaser in that Keith actually subconsciously spoiled something for you regarding Scion and the name. And when you get to that, I think that will make more sense to you about Scion.
Gotcha.
So I'll leave that there. As far as being able to be tracked, yeah, Dragon, I think, usually is good at keeping tabs on a lot of the big figures in the world out of necessity. And I think Scion counts for that too. Trying to think there's as far as contact is concerned, that's a little bit rougher. I'm trying to remember what interlude. Okay, no, you'll get more details I think later about what seems to be motivating Scion in a few arcs.
Okay, very cool. All right, I'm very intrigued by the idea of trigger vision, and I really like the way Wildbow uses that. And I started wondering if there are any parahumans who experience this more frequently. Maybe there's even somebody who is having it happen so often that they feel like they've, gone off the deep end and they're in some kind of facility trying to get treated or something.
That's a really good question. Yeah, trigger visions are a really big deal. The mechanics of them also do come into play later as well. It's very cool. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't give you too much without spoiling in that regard. But yeah, there's a meaning behind them, and there's also a meaning behind why no one can remember them. It's pretty brilliant. So I hope you also enjoy that that information once you get to it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Let me butt in real quick. The frequency of the trigger visions, you were asking about that, Andy. To this point in the story, asking you a question, have you been able to determine anything about their frequency or when they are occurring?
Well, they seem like they're happening more frequently. And thinking back, it seems like maybe it's like a critical mass kind of thing. Like I remember when they went to the mall and the the scum group was there. I can't remember their
The
name.
merchants.
They're gone now. The merchants. they've been rubbed out, so I don't care.
Put some respect on Skidmark's name, okay?
Oh man, I couldn't stand that group. I guess I'm too much of a goody two shoes. I was just like, those people are just not nice. But it seemed like when they were there and there was kind of this mass of parahumans, that's when it seemed like Skitter and Tattletale got it, if I'm remembering correctly. So I'm wondering if it's a critical mass thing, but it does seem to be happening more frequently.
Okay.
All right. Question number 3, the Endbringers. So they seem to be quite a bit of an outlier. I know some of the Cauldron folks are kind of messed up. I'm thinking of like Gregor, and then there was also
Neuter,
but no, I was thinking of one of the Slaughterhouse 9. Was it Crawler? Was that his name?
Crawler is not a case 53.
Okay. But I wondered if the Endbringers were some kind of manufactured parahumans gone horribly wrong, or some kind of early experiments that maybe the Cauldron type groups were doing on non-humans, or if it's something else, or if there's any insight you can give me on that.
I don't want to give much away, because the cool thing about the Endbringers is that it's not really explicitly clear. You have to use a lot of reasoning through the story to kind of figure it out. So I don't want to give too much to you there. They are one of the coolest mysteries in the story. So I will say that at least with case 53s, you will get a lot more insight on what makes a case 53. And then from that, I think you'll be able to determine whether you would make that leap, to extend that same leap of logic to the Endbringers or not. But the case 53s are made in a particular way. And when you see kind of how more of them seem to function, I think that answer will be clear to you.
Okay. Yeah, there was that interlude about Battery that talked about how, they had a whole like spreadsheet of, pay this much, you get this power, you get this strength, they get this kind of thing. And then there was also mention that depending on how much you resisted it when the horrible pain of the shot happened, that could impact how messed up you were or how normal you were as a parahuman. So I've gotten a little insight on that, but definitely wanting a lot more.
Yeah, Cauldron will come into play a bit later in the story, and a lot of those questions will become much clearer to you.
I want to interject real quick, Andy. This was actually something I should have posed to you in a question in part 1 of our review here regarding Legends Interlude. And when he went to Cauldron's location out there on the oil derrick and whatnot, right? And then he went back to New York HQ and he ran the modified lie detector test, and it came to that one discussion about, as he's remembering Battery and when she died. You remember that section, right? When as he was putting together all those reasons for what he did, getting the lie detector and her asking him to, in that haze from the miasma, she was like the big victim of the miasma in this story. She was hallucinating and coming in and out of herself and asking Legend to seek an answer to what happened to her about as far as Cauldron. You remember that section?
A little bit, yeah.
Let me read this. Let me see here. Give me 1 second. All right, so this is when Battery is dying. It says, her death had been slow, painful, and inevitable. It had been engineered to strike those notes in a way that millions of years of evolution had yet to refine a plant's toxin or animal venom. Lying in the hospital bed, still delirious, Battery had used halting sentences to tell him about Cauldron. about buying her powers, and about Cauldron asking her to help Siberian and Shatterbird escape. I had meant to bring that up during the first part of this episode. Did you have any thoughts on that? I thought this was kind of worth discussing.
I was intrigued by that. I mean, it makes sense. It's kind of a deathbed confession, and Battery was kind of out of it. And it also never sat well with her that she kind of had to make this quote unquote deal with the devil to try to get revenge. And so, and then when the favor came due and it was having to get some of the Slaughterhouse Nine, give them an escape, I'm sure that really bothered her a lot. So I guess, yeah, that makes sense then that she would ask Legend. They must have had some, crossed each other in the hallways or kind of knew about it, but maybe Legend didn't know all the stuff that was going on beneath the surface. So she asked him to investigate it. Then he uses the lie detector, and it looks like everybody's lying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just didn't want to give, because we had kind of blown past that section, and I thought her sacrifice was worthy of further commentary more than anything else. Tony, do you want to add anything to that particular item?
No, that's not. I'm afraid of going into too much at that point of the story, so I don't want to accidentally spoil.
Fair enough. Andy, why don't you keep going?
All right. I had actually skipped over one of the questions. I apologize. Question was about parallel universes. This is one of my favorite topics in science fiction literature, the whole Schrodinger's cat kind of thing, and very, very intriguing. But they mentioned one at the beginning, like in Arc 3 or something, where they're watching TV shows from the other parallel universe. But then in this Legend interview or interlude, he seems to imply that there's maybe more or maybe a lot more. So any clues you can give me there, or things I might have overlooked that indicate there are more parallel universes?
I'll let you use your reasoning to determine this, but yeah, you saw that at the beginning of the story they were watching from Earth Aleph, and then right. you I think by now you should know that they are on Earth Bet.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that kind of.
So if you follow that reasoning, you can at least infer a number of possible more Earths. How many, of course, is to be determined. But yeah, there's definitely other worlds. I can safely answer.
Okay. Oh man. All right. Well, so I don't know if you've watched Peripheral or read the book by William Gibson, but I thought they did a pretty good job of adapting the book to the small screen. And in that story, they figure out how to do time travel, but it creates a stub. It actually is, if anything happens, it creates an alternate universe or parallel universe at that point. And during the Peripheral story, they just basically start using everybody in those parallel universes as test subjects. They're like, oh, well, let's send back this plague and see what happens. And it's so messed up. But
interesting.
Yeah. So if you get a chance, I'd check it out.
Yeah, I might just do that.
All right. So next question is kind of a follow-on to the Endbringers one. Is there any info you can provide on other intelligent creatures like whales or primates that have triggered to become non-humans?
I don't know if that's a spoiler to answer that, but I would say that there's only really one exception that I can even think of where a non-human may have triggered, but by and large, it's pretty safe to say that it seems to just affect humans.
Okay, cool. All right. Last one is probably one we could talk about quite a bit. And my question was, are there other cauldron type organizations out there? Or in other words, criminal parahuman organizations flying under the radar?
Wait, hold on. First of all, why do you think Cauldron is criminal?
Well, basically that the pattern of, hey, no, I'll do this thing for you, and maybe someday I'll come to you with the favor.
Give you a favor, yeah.
Exactly. It was very Godfather-esque the way it came across. So, all right, maybe
you owe me three favors.
Exactly. So maybe I'm stereotyping, but I call that criminal.
So rude. No, I'm playing. There's a number of actually different factions in the story. How secret they are is up for the determination, I guess. But yeah, you'll actually see different groups because it is a world of capes. So you'll hear about and also see certain groups from other regions entirely. So like you'll see like what does the Chinese do with in respect to how their government works and then how they might utilize parahumans and what's going on in India, for example, and well, you'll get some insight into like the international level of capes as well as what we see in just in the U.S.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, because that last time Keith and I talked about, or earlier in this episode, we talked about imp and how if you use that power right, you could just mess with just about everything and nobody would remember that you were there and you messed with it. They would just think that, okay, that happened. And so I wondered if there were people in these organizations like that could be doing stuff that you actually aren't hearing about, but just kind of on a macro scale, what happens in meetings when imp turns on her power and somebody blurts out something and everybody's like, why did you just say that? And then the person who said it can't even remember why they said it.
Strangers are terrifying. The stranger class powers.
Okay.
And yeah, there's while Imp's power is very specific, when you see some of the other stranger effects that are out there, Wildbow does a really good job of making me unsettled by the thought of like these people who can basically manipulate your perceptions this way.
Yeah, Andy, remember how you used to be freaked out about Tattletale's power when you first started the story?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's like that, bro.
Okay.
the stranger classification. Yeah, it'll there's interesting times ahead.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that opens up tons of possibilities then. One thing I keep hoping that they'll do, and I think they did in one movie, was do like alternate endings where the author or the screenwriter has led you down a path and then the movie ends, but you think, well, maybe it could have gone a different way, like The Matrix, or something like that, where it's like, and they kind of did go that way with the fourth Matrix movie, where they're like, now he thinks he's back in again, and so, all right, very cool. Well, that's it for my list of questions. We actually got through that faster than I thought.
Tony, did you have anything?
Well, I remember you guys were talking about some of the hypotheticals of capes versus like the heroes from the show Heroes.
Oh yeah.
And those kind of hypotheticals are kind of up my alley. I did like to explore those if you wanted to.
And Andy, you want to share? Because at the time of us recording this, Tony has not heard your section that we did, Heroes versus Capes. You want to expand on a couple of those items?
Sure. Let me pull that up quick. Yeah. All right. So
maybe maybe just pick your two favorites out of your list there, and then you and Tony have a discussion about those.
Okay. Cherish versus Eden McCain.
Versus who?
Eden McCain. She was one of the early heroes who worked with Bennett. She befriended Mohinder, and she was trying to figure out what Mohinder's dad knew, and she was good at just suggestion. She could get out of speeding tickets and that kind of thing, and basically, yeah. And if you think there's a better hero and parahuman pairing than I figured out, then that's cool too, because I went back and forth on some of them.
Okay. Yeah, so the mechanics in Worm, when it comes to capes like Cherish, people who can manipulate or master class capes, tend to resist each other to a certain extent. Like people like Cherish who can control emotions are a little bit less effective against other people who have emotion-based powers. But Cherish, I would say, in the head-to-head against Eden would probably win, and that's because of Cherish's range. Cherish can sense where people are from extremely long distances. I don't even remember the exact distance, but it's much further than what people would be able to see or hear normally. So she could pinpoint and probably just kind of have the conditional advantage just from her range advantage alone. But
Gotcha.
How resistant Eden would be, because heroes obviously have kind of a different mechanics for how their powers work versus what happens in Worm will be wonky. So like there's certain capes that like the Haitian, for example, would be weird because there's capes like the Haitian in Worm, but the way that their powers work are basically based on how the powers kind of manifested in the Parahumans universe. So I don't know how that would actually affect a cape. Stuff like that would be kind of hard to answer.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that answers another one. I was going to ask Imp versus the Haitians, so that one's been answered. So I'll go to Clock Blocker versus Hero.
Hero conceptually wins because anyone who can time travel can just go back in time to before someone became a cape. And just
there you go.
Cradle kill, like that's always a factor.
Wow, I hadn't even thought about that one.
So, and then also his power stops time for everyone, where Clock Blockers doesn't really stop time per se, puts things in a stasis, everything around him except for him. So Clock Blocker kind of just loses that for free. Hero's pretty OP. Hero would be pretty strong in the Worm universe, just because there aren't actually any time travelers in Parahumans. But he would not win. Funny enough, there are precogs counter Hero pretty hard. So
really,
yeah. So certain I don't know if I should drop any names.
No, you and I can talk offline. That's a conversation.
I can name a number of capes. I'll at least name an Endbringer. An Endbringer would easily beat Hero. There's just no way. The Simmer already won.
That's true.
By just the nature of what the Simmerg is.
That's true.
But there's some other capes, Trump effect capes as well that could also potentially beat Hero if Hero was not careful.
All right. Fascinating.
Very cool.
Okay, well then let me get real esoteric here, Tony. Could a cape like Hero exist in the Wildbow universe in Worm?
I don't think so. Usually the capes, the closest thing you get are capes that can teleport, like Oni Lee. You don't get capes that like fully bend time and space to kind of manipulate things. The closest you do get is a cape later. You'll see. I don't know if I should spoil the name of the cape.
No, don't. I'll figure it out when we get there.
Yeah. So at the very least, you get very mild, like very mild versions of anything remotely time related in the Parahumans universe. There's nothing I think that would be on quite the extreme scale like Hero. That's kind of too busted, I think. It can kind of lead to lazy writing when you have someone who can time travel like that, which is why I think he wanted to avoid powers like that.
Very cool. Excellent.
Yeah. Along those lines, I think he did a great job of trying to avoid or mitigate the OP factor that often comes into comic stuff. It seems like everybody's got some vulnerability, or they're like Cyan, where they're just wherever, and they might be like Superman, but you can't really count on them. But so
yeah, like more like a Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was one thing that bugged me about like the DC universe. People would say, "Well, Batman versus Superman." I'm like, seriously? All he has to do is take him to space, and Batman's dead. I mean, then you have to fight him.
Actually, no, he just looks at him funny. Actually,
right? Yeah, that too. Yeah, he just waits till he gets in the shower, and then he boils him in there with the water. I mean, it's just...
exactly. And that goes to
leaves the earth and sneezes, or depending on how far back in the comics you want to go.
Right.
And that goes to a point that I regularly point out about this story is I like the limits that Wildbow places on the capes in general. They are almost as intriguing as the powers themselves.
Yeah, it's a closed power system, meaning that it's the system isn't just like open to the pure imagination of whoever has the power. There's like very set limitations, ranges, power, strength, and it's up to the characters to have the creativity to utilize those powers in ways that are, beneficial to them. And you see that in Worm, where you look at a character like Panacea, and even Taylor touches on that, like, wow, if I had that power, I would be doing this and this and this, and you just see like just wasted potential from this character. Because they just don't want, they make these rules for themselves. I'm like, I don't want to do it, and and you understand why, because trauma is the nature of a lot of the powers in the story. So there is a little degree of reluctance to use a lot of powers for a lot of capes, and because of that.
All right, well, that brings up a question. So there are things that, well, like, say hypothetically, somebody like the Haitian went to somebody like Panacea and removed the memories that caused the trauma. Would Panacea lose her powers, or would it just take off the limits, you think? Do you think she would kind of go wild and turn into a 10-foot Amazon woman with 5 arms or something, and just...
removing memories, I don't think would impact their powers. Of course, that would definitely change her personality, and depending on what direction Amy would go in that hypothetical, she would probably utilize her power differently. Still probably not to the maximum potential, just because I don't think Amy is that clever of a character. But yeah, she would probably be more inclined to do other things for sure, if her memories or thoughts or personalities were manipulated in any way.
Okay. Yeah, so that's
but no, your ability to use, I think, with the mechanics for how the powers work, they will probably be there unless you have a bone saw type involved.
Oh man, good old bone saw.
Good old bone saw.
I gotta say though, and this has got to be one of the hardest things writing superhero stuff, is not reusing names. But when I read Bonesaw, the first thing I thought of was that wrestler dude from the first Spider-Man movie. I was like, what?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, Macho Man.
Exactly. You gotta get in the ring with me, and you're gonna be here.
Nope, cute little girl who just hacks you apart.
Right. And makes jokes while she's doing it.
No swearing.
That's right.
No swearing. No swearing. All right. Andy, anything else you want to close out with there, bud? Any other additions, questions?
Well, just if Tony can give me a little, tiny spoiler or insight into what was his favorite part of Arc 15, or something that I can be super into coming, it's coming up, coming attractions.
Yeah, keep it in the immediate next
something to
arc.
Be excited for. In Arc 18, there is an interlude that will give you a lot more insight into Scion. And I think it's one of the coolest standalone interludes, like meaning that if you just read that interlude without reading the whole story, it's really interesting and very cool to kind of think about. And it's called the most powerful man in the world. And it's I think that one's a banger that's coming up for you.
I concur, Andy. I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that one.
Excellent. That's exactly what I was looking for. Something to be like, oh man, it's like when you get to the end of the Marvel movie and they have the little after the credits thing telling you what's going to happen in the next one. You're like, oh man, I gotta wait 2 years for the next movie. But this is only a few arcs away, so.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we'll bring this segment to a close, and I want to say, Tony, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I hope that this will not be the last time we manage to get you on here.
Thank you guys for having me on. It was a lot of fun, and I'd love to keep sharing more with you if you guys want me to.
Outstanding. And thanks to our listeners for joining us each episode. We're glad to share our discussions with you. We're taking a break before recording our next episode. Look for our review of Arc 15 about 6 weeks from the time this is published. We hope you'll return as Andy moves deeper into the story to see what lies ahead for Taylor Hebert. So until next time, take care.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. I really enjoyed it. It was great talking to you, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, definitely a lot. I can't wait to talk to you about once you get to the end. I have so many fun questions to throw at you.
Very cool. I look forward to it. And thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you have a great little break from everything like we will, and we'll talk to you soon enough. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us in this video. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more information in the link down below. Catch you later.